Hey there, everybody. Welcome into Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan football and basketball writer for The Free, joined as always by my co-host, our Big Ten insider, Reiner Sabin. Outside of the 45-minute phone call with tech support trying to set up your microphone, how you doing?
I'm not going to comment on that. I'm really infuriated. But, I'm going to power through this and try not to let my downcast mood affect the podcast.
No, and we know you're a true professional, a pro's pro, as is our producer and editor who joins us as well, Andrew Burkle, who helps facilitate that. Although I don't know if I should brag that Andrew was facilitating that because I don't know that we reached a resolution.
I set up the call that ended up being even more frustrating for Reiner, so I don't get too much credit this time around. So apologies, Reiner, but we'll get it figured out eventually. But that's also, we should point out why Reiner's mic might sound a little bit different, but we promise we're going to get it resolved here sooner than later.
You're lucky that I even have the computer to be able to conduct this podcast.
As you said, it almost went out the window before.
Yeah, off the balcony. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's not for lack of effort, certainly. And we will be together in about an hour or so, actually, at Michigan football practice at Al Glick Fieldhouse, where I'll do my best and we will do our best to see if we can confirm the rumors. Yes, we've heard them about Rod Moore and a torn ACL. But again, it is just a rumor for now. I talked to somebody around the program who has confirmed things to me at times, and they've just reminded me, look, it's a matter of HIPAA. And it is just it's an injury privacy thing. And until the player wants to speak on it, or unless someone is going to speak out, this person's not going to can't say anything. So we'll do that. However, the reason we are here is not to talk about the defending national champion football team. It's to talk about the red hot basketball team. That's right. Talk about a 180 in a couple of weeks. Michigan basketball has its new head coach, Dusty May, the 18th head coach in program history, 47 years old, comes from Florida Atlantic, spent 6 years there, had a winning record every season, 60-13 the past 2 years with a couple NCAA tournament appearances. He was a hot name in this coaching cycle that came and went pretty quickly. What was your, overarching thoughts when that was the guy? And then after yesterday, we got to be around him for a little bit. Opening press conference, your number one takeaway from Dusty May?
I thought it was, obviously a pretty good hire. And given the fact that it was handled, rather quickly and pretty seamlessly by Ward Manuel, to do it within 8 days of getting rid of Juwan Howard and moving that swiftly and getting the guy that he wanted, I thought was well executed. And I think May shows a lot of good qualities. And he talked about things that I think will appeal to Michigan's fan base, especially wanting to play an attractive style of basketball. And he is, up with the times and the modern, systems that you see in the NBA and the modern, strategy points, which includes, shooting a lot of threes, taking high percentage of shots down low and not really settling for those mid-range jump shots that kind of spoke to, the old style that was inefficient. So I think he's going to kind of be able to bring a new vision, but also be able to execute it. And I think, Juwan Howard probably wanted to do some of those things too, but I don't think he was capable of executing it. And I think he also has a good idea of how to build a roster and such, and doesn't seem like he's going to do it in a quick fix manner. He talked about bringing in players and kind of developing them at a young age, not really relying as much on the transfer portal. And I think that was an encouraging sign too.
Yeah, it felt like he said a lot of the right things, and I think you just did a great job touching on them, right? And it's funny. So one of them, NIL. Around here, people think Michigan basketball is limited NIL-wise. He comes from FAU. He's like, look at all these resources I have, right? Then he talks about the limitations of Michigan basketball. And I heard him talking on, I guess I'll plug him, on 97.1 The Ticket earlier this morning, and he was talking about when he was on staff at Indiana. He wasn't an assistant, but he was an analyst. He was a student manager before that, but then he was an analyst, and he would go on recruiting trips with with staffers, and they would, and sort of the way they would sell people on Bob Knight is, hey, not everybody can play for Bobby Knight, right? But the type of people who can, that's really who we're looking for anyway. And he sort of equated that to Michigan, right? Michigan is not probably going to be able to pull from the same talent pool. However, it does take a certain type of person to be successful at Michigan. I mean, I think we've heard the football program, right, say that for years. And so he sort of leaned into that. I thought that was pretty well said, right? Understanding the limitations, but still embracing, like using your strengths to drive your narrative and to land the people who are going to do what you need to do. And then you also touched on, he's not just going to be in the transfer portal. He's not just going to recruit high school players. I think the line was, he said, we want to find the best players and do what they do best, right? Like, someone asked what his philosophy is. He says that's really what it, I mean, you touched on it. It's new age. He said we probably shoot too many threes, which was funny. It's threes, layups, or free throws. That's what he wants. And whoever there does not need to be a specific type of person to do that, right? It's just, and I think that seems encouraging if you're not pigeonholed to one specific type of player.
Sure. And I mean, he's obviously evolved. I mean, he comes from Bob Knight tree. I mean, in the sense that he was a student manager for him. I mean, that's a different style of play and more probably traditional old school way. And then now he's obviously incorporating a lot of these new modern ideas as well. So, but I think the work history is also encouraging just because of the fact that he had to start at the very bottom and work his way up. And I think that that's always good. I mean, if we look at Juwan Howard, I mean, he was an NBA assistant, but he didn't, he walked into an NBA assistant's job. I mean,
he never cut his teeth.
Whereas and he never coached in college and, or at the college level. And so, it's a different ball game, when you're going from pros to college and all the different management issues. And he ran into it with you can't just, acquire a player automatically, especially at Michigan, where you have transfer admissions hang-ups that interfere with the ability to add a player sometimes. And he faced that with Caleb Love and Terrence Shannon Jr., and that affects roster building and such. And, whereas Dusty May, he's dealt with all of this stuff, and he's seen the program at all levels, and probably got to experience it in every possible angle, shape, whatever that he experienced. And so I think that that's going to end up benefiting him as he makes the transition to Michigan, where there are some of the college issues that you would deal with probably more regularly than at even a typical university or Division I program.
Certainly. And I think it's probably worth looking, just quick look back at how he got here, right? Just to hear all the stops he made, right? A couple years at Eastern Michigan, a couple years at Murray State, 3 years at UAB under Mike Davis, former Detroit Mercy head coach, 6 years at Louisiana Tech, 3 at Florida, and then 6 more at Florida Atlantic recently as the head coach, right? So, I mean, all over the country, you got it checks a lot of boxes, right? You've seen different levels of programs, right? Mid-major and Power 5. You've seen you've been an assistant, you've been a head coach, you've been in the South, but your roots are Midwest. It's just, I mean, he's 47, so he's young enough to be malleable, right? And still lean into all this new stuff. But who is a more old school coach than Bobby Knight? No one. And so it just feels like there's a lot of the things happened that you could feel really positive about, and you can see a path forward if you're Michigan. When a week ago, I don't know that you could. I mean, I couldn't. I was pretty skeptical about what they were going to do and what this next season was going to look like. So I would say, Reiner, my main takeaway was it just felt right for someone who's not a Michigan man, right? And you don't get to have any of those cliches. Oh, I remember when I stayed in Markley, or oh yeah, Pizza Bob's, just like none of that BS, right? Or Mr. Spots, or none of it. It's just, he's like, yeah, I mean, like, I coached up the road in Ipsy, but I actually haven't been to the big house. Like, I'd never been to a game in the big house. My son was born in St. Joe's. And so, like, he's coming home, right? Like, it's touching both of those things. And these introductory press conferences, frankly, I mean, let's just call it what it is. They can be awkward, right? They can be, it's a new relationship. It's a song and dance. And they both said it, right? Ward Manuel and Dusty, they said it was like speed dating, right? And you are trying to get to know people. You're making essentially the biggest career decision of your life in 48 hours, right? And so for all of those things to have happened, for it to have felt as natural as it had, and believe me, I do not use that word lightly. You know we don't around these programs because it just isn't like that very often. I thought it was a really good fit.
Yeah, no, I agree. When you said the awkward introductory press conference, it reminds me of Dana Altman at Arkansas. He was there for like 2 to 3 days, and like they did the hog call there, and he was just like, "When am I in? What am I doing here? Like, this is like not good." And so he immediately bailed. Within like a couple of days, it was terribly awkward. Arkansas ended up with John Pelfrey, and that was a disaster. And it was just like it was such a mess. But yeah, I remember that because I mean, you know, sometimes you do get a feel from the press conference where it's just like this guy does not get it, or this is not a fit.
I mean, we watched Les Miles, right? Hey, y'all. I mean, it sounded like he was talking with a Southern drawl. Like he was
Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly.
Oh,
right?
Yes. That's what I meant. Yes. Brian Kelly. What did I say?
Les Miles.
Michigan
man.
Goodness.
Les Miles.
Yes. Wrong LSU coach. Yes. Brian Kelly. Thank you. We'll leave that in there. Just that was fun. But yeah, Brian Kelly, right? Like he, so it is not always that way. And so who gets the credit for that, Reiner? It's Ward. I think you wrote a great piece about it. And I tended to agree with it even before I read it. It should be, I believe, Ward Manuel, the guy who hired him, made the call, sort of led the process. I will do very briefly a little background, and then I want to give it to you, right? So Ward fires Juwan 12 days ago, I think now 13. Then he has a decision to make. They get a search firm. He starts narrowing down some candidates. He gets his own candidate pool. And then he starts running it by John Beilein, the former Hall of Fame coach. They exchange notes multiple times, hour and a half. Beilein even comes, right, to he's already down in Florida, in Naples. He then comes to Fort Lauderdale to sort of seal the deal after Ward had said, "Hey, I really like Dusty May." And then John's like, "You want me to sort of come talk X's and O's?" Ward thought that was going to put it over the top. Sure enough, it did. So that's just sort of the background of how it happened. But Reiner, I wanted to give you the floor about really sort of what that means and anything else related to it, because it was notable. This is a very, very notable hire for Ward Manuel.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the previous impression of Ward was that he kind of took the path of least resistance and was kind of, his default setting was inertia. So he wasn't going to do anything. And people assumed that he really wouldn't want to do anything with Juwan Howard because he was a member of the Fab Five and he was, Ward Manuel's first major hire. And he kind of defied everybody's expectations, especially his critics, who said he didn't have the strength or the courage to do this. And yet he did it pretty expeditiously and efficiently. I mean, he got rid of him within 48 hours, got rid of Juwan Howard within 48 hours of the season ending, 8-24 season, and then moved rather quickly to hire Dusty May. I mean, it was a process that unfolded in in a span of 8 days. He identified his candidate by Selection Sunday. And then once, Dusty May and FAU were eliminated on Friday, he basically flew down to Fort Lauderdale the next day and hammered out the deal. And I think it was pretty impressive. And he outflanked Louisville in the process. Louisville's obviously, a basketball school. I mean, that's where they hang their hat on. I mean, Michigan's a football school. I mean, I don't think anybody would deny that. And so he was able to sway, May to come to Michigan and be the coach here. And I think it was pretty impressive given the fact that, again, the impression of Ward really up until this point, was that, he didn't have the kind of nimbleness to be able to go forward, or maybe the conviction to do that. And he kind of showed everybody else, like, hey, I can do this, and I can do it pretty effectively. And, I think it's also a sign of his changing style. I mean, we've seen him be more open with the media in the last 3 or 4 months than he ever has. I mean, since I've been covering this program. And then also the fact that it seems like he's more, willing to embrace NIL, putting in that executive general manager position through the partnership with Learfield and also Sports Partners. And so, I think it's a sign that he's kind of evolving as a leader, which can only benefit Michigan going forward.
I'm pretty much in lockstep with you, but I wonder if this was not also an opportunity for him to sort of show who he is, and maybe this is more Ward Manuel than people really think. Ward does not want to make changes, but it does not mean he's not willing to and won't do it. Now, there's plenty of evidence that shows that he will wait far too long to do it, right? Hockey, Mel Pearson, probably, namely the number one example. But I really believe, like, people think that because he didn't get rid of Jim after 2020, he was unwilling and he was going to ride everything into the ground no matter what 100% of the time. I think he actually just believed, look, this year was an anomaly. Look at what we've done the other years, 10-3. And I mean, whether the spot was right or not, in Ohio State. Go.
Can I butt in? I mean, the reason why I don't agree with that necessarily is because he basically, pushed Jim Harbaugh to throw out his defense and change a huge aspect of his program. So he definitely saw that there were some fault lines forming within the program that needed, and he basically, I think, encouraged him to rethink how he wanted to arrange his staff, which brought in that youth infusion that ultimately really benefited Michigan with creating the team culture. And so, but I think that, it's much easier to keep Jim Harbaugh than to go try to find a new coach and recreate a whole entire new system and such. And so I think, given the roster composition, some of the other things that were going on, I mean, it probably, in his mind, made sense just to keep a guy. Plus, I mean, again, Jim Harbaugh had sweat equity in this in the program that obviously went long before he ever coached there. So, I mean, going back to his playing days. So I think it was, again, much easier than basically bailing on him and having to go through a coaching search.
But I was told by someone in the know that, I mean, yes, it was the easier decision, but someone said that if Ward had not heard from Jim at that end of season meeting, that, like, it was not just that Ward said, look, you need to fire Don Brown, you need to do these things. What I was told is Jim came to him like, look, this is not working. We need to do X, Y, and Z. We need to get younger at the coordinator. We need to reinvest in our recruiting and those, that was really, it was 1-2 took everything off. And so I'm just saying, maybe we didn't see how willing or unwilling Ward was to make a power move. I don't think he would have done it. I'm with you. However, people were baffled by this, right? Like, people thought he was literally unwilling to do it. And I think he is a little more, I mean, and as you said, he's more willing than he's showed. Yeah. I think he just thinks he's making, when he hasn't before, what I'm trying to say is, it's not that he's unwilling. He thinks he's making the right decision by not doing it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, in some cases, I think he's more responsive to the people.
Oh, he's reactive, not proactive.
Well, no, he's been reactive, but I think in some ways he's now, I don't want to say crowdsourcing, but he is starting to listen to the feedback, I think, a little bit more. He's starting to, I think that's why you're seeing more of him be more public.
Which feedback?
More transparent, because I think he's lost control of the narrative. and people are just making all these assumptions about his leadership style. So I think he's starting to listen to the outside and maybe rethinking some things as far as he's concerned and how he wants to proceed as athletic director. Because, I mean, again, it wasn't a good look with the Mel Pearson situation, with how that, he had the report in May and waited until August and it even expressed, it seemed like, reluctance to move on from him when, again, the program was beset with all these allegations and such. And so, that was not a good look for him. And, it seemed like he was always kind of caught flat-footed or just kind of not reacting in real time to some of these bad events. And so this impression of him formed where it was just like, this guy just doesn't want to do anything or make the hard decisions. And this was a clear-cut example of a guy who, making a hard decision, because, again, this Juwan Howard was his first major hire. And so it is a bad look in some ways that, it failed for Warde Manuel. But it's now a better look because he didn't decide to just stick to his
stubborn. He wasn't stubborn.
Yeah. And I think that was a good look, a really good look. And it totally whitewashed all the bad stuff that you had thought about Warde and the impression that he was just going to go down with a sinking ship with Juwan Howard.
Yeah. we need a little more time, right, to pass in order to look back on history, for history to be history, and then really dissect it. It's so hard in the moment. But I don't wonder if things might look back more favorably on Warde in his time as a Michigan athletic director. Certainly then right now. What is his favorability rating within the fan base? 20%? If that. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, he's doing a much better job than 20%. Am I crazy? Am I nuts? Did Michigan football not just win a national championship?
Just to budge in here. You can't forget about some of the off the field scandals that have happened too. You had Michigan's football program still under NCAA investigation. You have, the COVID stuff, and obviously the
onboarding.
The Schembechler thing, and you had some of the coaching staff issues, and then you had the thing with his car or his wife's car, not too long ago as well. So I think there are some reasons that it wasn't just, you know what I mean? Like, there's reasons why I think that it got to this point, if you know what I mean. But I do think it's a fair point about, like, obviously history with the Harbaugh thing could not have turned any more favorable for Warde. He sat it out. He got the guy to take a pay cut, and then watched him win a national championship.
Watch him win 3 Big Ten championships in a row and flip the script against Ohio State and decimate their fan base.
Well, and also people didn't think that he would move on from Juwan after the slap situation because, again, there was supposedly a zero tolerance policy, and then you had this situation with John Sanders. So there was a reason why people thought he was just going to do what he had always done, which was basically not do much or, not go ahead and make a move. And he was just going to wait it out and see what might happen and hope upon hope that it was going to turn around organically. And instead, he finally, bowed up and made a call, and it was the right call. The program was not going in the right direction, and he made that call. And then he went out and hired somebody who looks like he really can run a program and develop a program and make a winner. And seems like he has the understanding of the Michigan culture, even without not having coached here or spent any time here. I do think he probably benefits in some ways from his experience in Ypsilanti over at Eastern Michigan. Even if you're not at Michigan, you hear about Michigan all the time if you're over in Ypsi. So, it's like, so I think he's somewhat acquainted with the culture here and the landscape itself. And I think that was good too. But again, Warde Manuel went out and hired his guy and acted in a pretty efficient manner, which again defied his history and the criticism that he and the critics that believed he couldn't do this.
Yep, he got it done. And we got to take a quick break, but on the other side, we'll get a little bit more into that man who he hired, Dusty May. We'll be right back. This is Hail Yes. All right, Reiner, obviously we've been going about Dusty May and sort of about the process that got him here, Ward Manual, what it means. I don't know if we ever said this, but clearly I think it was almost implied. Obviously, he gives an F about basketball, right? I mean, there was a lot of people that, just to put a bow on what we were just saying, a lot of people, like you said that he wouldn't do it, and he did. So now that's why we want to take this 30,000 foot view of the program, right? Because I think Andrew made an awesome point off air. Here, Andrew, I don't know. I don't need to make your point. Andrew, you make the point about how different this felt, right? Than 65 some odd days ago when we were going through a different hire.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't in the room for either of them. I watched them both on TV. We're talking about Sharon Moore being introduced as Michigan football's head coach, and you're talking about, Dusty May taking over the basketball program. Obviously, the people who made this decision 65 days ago were basically the same group of people. You have the president, you have Ward, you have, the movers and shakers. But it's just hard to capture how different this felt compared to the Michigan football introduction. Obviously, Dusty and Sharon are different people. But Sharon's press conference, first of all, it fell right before the Lions 49ers game. So a lot of the media was out of town. That's one factor. The other thing is that no one wanted a reboot of the Michigan football program. Nobody wanted a reset. They want to keep going from where they were. So it almost kind of felt like an awkward transition of power in some ways, where it's like, hey, this is Sharon's thing now, but he's going to do it in Sharon's own little way. Versus this felt like Michigan's basketball program had gotten so down that a clean slate was not hard. It's almost appealing to Dusty May. And you could feel almost as if the energy had been left off people's shoulders. You had Red Barons in there, Kim Barnes-Arico is there. You had, it felt like, hey, this is who we are. We're resetting. And it felt entirely different than Sharon's. And I'm not saying one is better than the other necessarily. Obviously, I think it's a pretty safe bet that Michigan football will be better than Michigan basketball next year. But it is just I thought an interesting dichotomy of how different it was between the two press conferences, 60 days apart, same people involved.
It's a great point. And now that brings us to really the entrance of the Dusty May era, right? Sharon Moore, I mean, you just nailed it. Sharon Moore, it was just, we'll just keep this thing going. It is as bare bones as a college basketball program at this level can possibly look right now. Michigan has Will Cheddar. They have George Washington III, who is actually technically in the transfer portal. And then they have Jace Howard, the son of the coach who was just fired. Doug McDaniel's in the portal. Terrace Reed is in the portal. Olivier Cumwa has graduated. Trey Jackson has graduated. Jalen Llewellyn has graduated. Namari Burnett has not expressed interest to return. Terrence Williams has not expressed interest to return. Then you got Connie Roos, the incoming 4-star, 5-star freshman who decommitted, right? You have Christian Anderson and Fat Brooks are still committed, but that's it, right? And so now this gives Dusty May the opportunity to sort of really build the program in his image, right? I mean, and he's also, I think, going to get a crash course on just how hard it is to bring these transfers in, right? When you have to bring this many transfers in, I mean, I don't know how else they're going to round out a roster.
No, I was going to say the same thing earlier. He talked about, and every coach says this in today's day and age, you want to build the roster through recruiting and then supplement it with the transfer portal. Michigan fans, I don't think, should overreact to how many transfers are brought in this time around, because like you said, the roster is desolate. There's just not enough guys to fill out. They're not going to have 12 freshmen on this team, So if they go out and get 6 freshmen or 5 freshmen and fill out the rest of the roster with transfers and whatnot, obviously you have your walk-ons and stuff too. But I just think that this is going to be, it's not going to say everything about how Dusty wants to build a team just because the roster's so wiped clean. However, I think that could be appealing to someone where if you have a team that's low key, sort of kind of, with expectations, even if like say Dusty was coming to take over this team from last year, when you have Olivier Nkamwa, you have Namari Burnett, you have some guys where you'd have, hey, he could maybe put together a few wins. I think this is more appealing because he can get in whoever he wants. He can, and the expectations couldn't be lower.
They couldn't they couldn't be lower unless you listened to him yesterday. And he talked about like, look, year one is extremely important for us. And he felt it was at FAU also, right? To get the fans interested, to get belief in the culture, in the new vision, in the new program, or in just the new direction, right? And so you're right. Of course, you cannot judge what Dusty May's program will, like the end vision of his program will look like when he's hired at the end of March and he's got 6 months to put a team together, right? And you mentioned, right, we were talking off air. I mean, his leading scorer, John L. Davis, put up 18 and 6 last year. He was a junior at FAU. I think he's going to be a senior now. That's not going to work. He's not going to be able to make it. I guess I can't say for certain. I've never met this young man and don't know his credits, and maybe he's going to graduate early. But I don't think so. I haven't heard that he's scheduled to. And so,
can you clarify what you mean by that? Just because he's a junior and his credits won't transfer over, or what do you mean about that? Just for the people who don't know.
Sorry. Michigan admissions. I mean, Reiner touched on it a little earlier in the episode. You really just can't transfer in as an athlete with more than 60 credits. They don't transfer over properly, and then they have to wipe and reset, and then it sort of resets your standing. Maybe this makes me sound uneducated. I don't know the actual inner workings of how it works. I just know Michigan can't accept people with more than 60 credits unless you're a grad student. Is that what I was going to say? Unless you're a grad student like Nkamwa or was Burnett a grad student as well? Yep, all three of them. And once you've graduated, you're good. So Michigan is limited to you can have just played your freshman year, or you have to be done. But those sophomores, those junior, like a Hunter Dickinson type, right? Like someone who has been proven and is just looking for a change of scenery for that last year, that can't happen here unless something changes.
I mean, it feels so like Stone Age, though, doesn't it? I mean, this is like they're basically operating under the same rules as back when everyone would pick up a grad student here and there. And you've seen basketball programs. Oh, he's a fifth year. He had an extra year of eligibility, and they transferred. Like that's like the Stone Age of the transfer portal, And now, so I don't know. I feel like that is a tough circumstance to work with if that's actually the by the book definition playbook they're playing by,
Yeah, I mean, the transfer portal will, continually be an issue. The reason why grad students can get in easily, by the way, and it has nothing to do with the transfer. It's just they're basically new students. I mean, they're going into a new program, so it makes it easier. And then, like you said, the freshmen or earlier the better if you're undergraduate, because the amount of credits that are going to be transferred, you're not going to fall behind academically, and risk being perhaps ineligible due to the transfer situation. So yeah, there's a lot of hangups there, but you can work around it. And based on the way that Dusty May seems to want to construct the roster, where it might not even be an issue, given the fact that it seems like he wants to, keep guys 3-4 years to get that continuity. So the idea is probably going to be retention, which again has been the effective strategy for the football program. It's been more focused on retention as opposed to acquisition.
Yeah. Although it's funny you say that, the next few weeks and months will be purely acquisition, right? I mean, he needs to round out a staff. He needs to implement. So everything he wants to do is not what's going to be happening over the next few months, right? He's just gotta get some groundwork, and that's really what happens when you take over an 8-24 team that didn't have an identity, and they can say they had a culture. There was not one, at least not a good one. And so now it has to be reset. But I think you both said it, or certainly Andrew did. That seems in some ways more promising. So Reiner, is there, as we get ready to put a bow on this, I mean, there are so much unknown. I mean, we're only in the Sweet 16, right? Like this basketball season has to finish. We don't know who's going to be in the portal, who's not. I mean, assistant staffers, forget about, like, I don't want to ask you for a specific name, but what would success over this offseason look like to you? What does Dusty May need to do?
I just think he needs to put together a roster that's going to be the foundation of the program going forward. And I don't think, again, he talked about wanting to, create an attractive style of basketball. But I think it's, more important to, have a couple of glue guys, like the Eli Brooks of the world, people that are going to stay, 3, 4, years, really be able to kind of invest in the program and carry it forward and get the fundamental, mission and carry that forward for the program. That foundation is really important, I think. I don't think, trying to, create a patchwork roster just for one season is really the way to go. Again, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of these like constant turnover cycles that you see with a lot of these programs. I think it's much better to try to build it from the ground up. And if you can get a couple guys, maybe just, 2, 3 guys that can do that and will be here for 3 or 4 years, I think it's going to really benefit Michigan in the long run.
Absolutely. And Dusty May can convince guys. It's different at FAU than at Michigan, but Dusty May can convince guys to one, come, and to 2, stay. He returned all 5 of his starters from his Final Four team last year, right? And in this day and age they could have parlayed that Final Four run at FAU and gone off to a Power 5, right? So I think that speaks very well. And then also, here's another story I heard from an assistant coach who used to work with him. He remembers this coach got a call from Dusty May one time. I think it was like 2015, 2016. And May was super pumped. He was on the phone and he was like, hey, this is when he was an assistant at Florida. He was like, look, I just got this guy. He's kind of a diamond in the rough, a little rough around the edges, but he is the real deal. And I think we got him. I think he's going to commit here. I'm pretty sure he did commit to Florida verbally. And then I was telling Andrew the story off air before the show. He ended up becoming a 5-star. He ended up flipping his commitment to Kentucky. And now he is a relatively well-known basketball player, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And Dusty May was just about the first one to really see his talent. I think he was a sophomore maybe in high school and not on the national radar. So I think if you're Michigan, something like that has to be unbelievably exciting. The idea that he didn't land him, but he was at Florida versus Kentucky, right? Now you got to get to that next step. But just, talent identification. Josh Smith, everybody knew about when he was a 5-star, right? But it's that next level. And then you getting guys to stay, identifying it. But if I could pick one thing, for the love of God, get a 4-year point guard. Because Juwan Howard, that was one of the major things he was unable to do, right? It was just constant turnover at that position, whether it was Mike Smith, Devontae Jones, Jalen Llewellyn, Doug McDaniel, and we all saw the catastrophe that ended up being in the end. And the guy you mentioned, right? Who was it? Who was kind of the glue guy? It was Eli Brooks. It was a 4-year, 5-year guy, unheralded, unrecruited, but just develop, just work, just learn the program and blossom into senior guards win. They just do. You know what I mean? And Michigan hasn't had that. And so I think, and it seems like that's what Dusty wants, right? Like he wants these guys to stay around. He said it. He's like, I have super long-term relationships with all these guys who I've coached. And I think if I'm Michigan, if nothing else, because it's a lot to expect an NCAA tournament run or something like that this year. If nothing else, I want a 4-star point guard who's 6'2", 190, who can shoot and looks like he's going to be the future of this program. That's what I want if I have to pick one thing, because they haven't had it.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, again, it speaks to, in some ways, if you can bring the mid-major idea to the Power 5, sprinkle in a couple of Power 5 guys. But part of the reason why the mid-majors have made such advancements in the NCAA tournament is because they generally are able to retain those players because, 1, they're not going to the NBA, and 2, they're not maybe good enough to initially poach from off the roster and go to the bigger program. So they develop over the course of their time there. And by the time they're seniors. I mean, again, much more experience. I mean, look at the Golke kid at Oakland. I mean, like that guy started out as a Division II type player. By the end, I mean, he's sinking jumpers all over Kentucky and nailing threes and beating lottery picks to the punch. And that just shows experience matters. And if you can get experienced players, and you have a much better chance of going deeper in the tournament.
Dude, Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepherd looked so lost. They looked like little boys, like lost, scared puppies on that court. I was so fortunate to just get to step in, right, and just have to sort of fill in for Oakland. I will never forget that weekend. What Golke did and Towns. I don't know why we're on this, but holy hell, dude, that was insane. Was that insane? Did you guys trip?
It was insane. But that's that's the beauty of March Madness. But it also shows again, what happened.
The seniors, Trey Townsend, senior, who stuck around 4 years. Chris Conway, senior, stuck around 4 years. Blake Lampman, senior, 5 years. Those were their three top guys. It wasn't Golke. Golke was actually their sixth man, right? And you said it, like he transferred in from Hillsdale. But these are all those four players combined, and then DQ Cole, senior. Those five players combined 22 years of college ball.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you beat Kentucky.
Yeah,
Stick around, develop, gel, form.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also a 22 and 23-year-old body type and maturity level, much different than an 18-year-old. And
is this when we get? Do we get our line? Is this when we get our Reiner soapbox?
What about the Jack Tuttle issue?
Yeah. Yep.
I don't think a 25-year-old should be playing college ball, but that's my opinion. I just think if you can rent a car, you should not be playing college basketball or college football or any college level sport. It's time to move on. But yes, again, and that's the reason. Just the difference between even a 25-year-old and a 22-year-old is pretty significant. But there's a huge difference. And then so if Michigan gets some of those 22-year-olds in the program, I think they're going to have a lot better chance to be successful.
Well, we'll see where Dusty May wants to start. A lot of work to do, but he seemed eager to do it. And it's just, Reiner, hard to believe. It's about 65 days ago, we were talking about Jim Harbaugh and Juwan Howard, right? A national champion, a coach struggling, leading his program, what the futures might look like. We both thought it could look like this. But it's another thing to be on the other side of it, with Sharon Moore as one head coach, Dusty May as another. These are people not with Michigan ties, right? A new era, across the board for the two major programs. What a big couple months for Ward Manuel. Still not out of the woodwork. Still got, as Andrew did a great job. And for the record, I'm not just saying Ward Manuel was some phenomenal AD and has not done anything wrong. There has been a ton that he had done wrong. And frankly, he could have, at separate points, maybe lost his job. All I was trying to say is now it's kind of like Jim Harbaugh, right? When you're given enough time, it can almost come full circle and it will look a little more favorable maybe than it did. So just thanks to everyone for listening, for participating, and thinking about Michigan athletics. It's next time we talk, it'll be more football, right? It is spring practice. We just talked to Donovan Edwards, Mason Graham. We got to get going here in about 5-10 minutes so we can go talk to, I don't even remember who we're scheduled to talk to today. Will Johnson, I believe, and some others. So till next time, it's hell yes.